What if I told you a teenager managed to rob a bank, not with a mask or a gun, but with nothing more than a laptop, a printer, and a shocking understanding of the law? No alarms went off, no getaway car needed, no criminal charges were filed. In fact, everything he did was so cleverly legal that when the bank finally realized what had happened, their own lawyers advised them to stay quiet. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This is a true story that exposes one of the most incredible legal loopholes in modern banking history, and how one teenage mastermind used the system not just to break the rules, but to rewrite them. In the age of digital finance, where money moves faster than ever before, we often assume banks are fortified by layers of impenetrable security, encryption, surveillance, federal oversight. But what most people don't know is that some of the most vulnerable points in the system aren't technical at all. They're human, they're legal, they're procedural. And if you understand them just well enough, or if you're smart enough to find the cracks in the system, you can legally do what criminals have tried and failed to do for decades. Meet Ethan, a 17-year-old high school senior from Oregon with no criminal record, no prior run-ins with the law, and absolutely no interest in traditional crime. He wasn't violent, he wasn't desperate, he wasn't poor. What he was curious. Ethan was obsessed with two things: law and finance. While other kids were playing Fortnite or posting TikToks, Ethan spent his nights studying court documents, reading federal banking codes, and learning how wire transfers, cashier's checks, and routing systems work. He wasn't trying to hack anything. He wanted to outsmart the system from within, and that's exactly what he did. It all started with a simple discovery. Ethan learned that in certain banking transactions, especially between smaller institutions and federal banks, there's a processing lag, sometimes up to 48 hours, where funds appear to be verified even though the verification hasn't actually been completed. This is called a float period. It's a normal part of the system, and it's used every day by businesses, traders, and sometimes scammers. But Ethan didn't want to scam anyone. He wanted to test the system legally. So he opened a small online business, legally registered, tax ID, everything. He created a legitimate-looking website that sold digital financial consulting services, a niche with vague enough services that few would question what was actually happening. With that business account, he set up ACH transferabilities through a local credit union and began initiating small transfers to himself from a second account he created at a different bank, using pre-authorized payment forms. The loophole? During the float period, the money appeared in his main account as cleared, even though the source bank hadn't finalized it yet. Then came the genius part. Ethan knew that if he pulled the money out before the system caught up, it would trigger a red flag. That's what most fraudsters do, and it gets them arrested. Instead, he let the funds sit there, showing as cleared, but never withdrew more than what the system would consider tolerable in a delay. He used timing, not theft. In the eyes of the law, he wasn't stealing. He was leveraging a legal float in the banking process. He wasn't lying, forging, or hacking. He was technically doing what the system allowed. He did this over and over. Tiny transfers, then larger ones, all under thresholds that would trigger mandatory reviews. He never exceeded $10,000 in a single transaction, the magic number that sets off federal reporting requirements. But here's where it gets even more incredible. He figured out how to issue cashier's checks backed by the floating funds and use them to buy high-value items from vendors who didn't verify funds in real time. Legally, the checks weren't bad. The funds were showing as cleared. The vendors accepted them, and within hours, Ethan had converted those items into assets, electronics, silver bullion, and even a used car. The untouchable gray area. Now, most people would say, wait, isn't that fraud? The answer is shockingly no. Or at least, it's not clearly fraud in the legal sense. Fraud requires intent to deceive and actual loss. But Ethan never made any false statements. The accounts were real. The businesses were real. The checks cleared because the system said they did, even if it corrected later. The vendors received what they were promised. And when the bank accounts reversed the funds due to unverified sources, it was too late. The banks took the loss. But here's the kicker. The banks couldn't pin it on Ethan. Why? Because he used only publicly available forms, correct procedures, and never touched stolen data. Every step was by the book. He simply understood the timing better than the banks did. The banks fight back and fail. After a few weeks, the trail began to show. Multiple banks noticed odd timing patterns and began to link the IP addresses and routing details to Ethan's business. But by then, he had already transferred most of his assets into a legally structured trust under his parents' name. He even filed a business tax return showing consulting revenue in the exact amounts he'd moved through the float process. His digital paper trail was so clean that when investigators arrived at his door, he simply showed them the receipts, tax filings, and the contracts for the vendors he'd worked with. No guns, no violence, no breaking and entering. Just timing, paperwork, and a 17-year-old's obsession with legal structure. The banks filed complaints, of course. They tried to sue. But Ethan's legal team, which included a private attorney paid from a trust fund he'd set up, argued that everything done fell under creative arbitrage within legal banking procedures. And here's the jaw-dropper. The banks settled quietly. Why? Because publicizing the loophole would have made them look insecure and opened the floodgates for others to try the same thing. The aftermath. Legend or threat? Today, Ethan hasn't been arrested. He's not in jail. In fact, he's now being recruited by cybersecurity and legal risk firms. Some call him a genius. Others call him a dangerous manipulator of gray laws. But no matter what you call him, one thing is clear. He legally robbed the system, not with brute force, but with brilliance. His story is now studied in banking law courses across several universities, and his method has led to quiet but significant changes in how banks handle float time, vendor verification, and ACH transaction buffers. Some have dubbed him the gentle hacker. Others call him the legal heister. But Ethan doesn't care about the headlines. According to him, he just wanted to see if it could be done. The lesson: know the system or be used by it. What does this story teach us? First, that the law isn't always about right or wrong. Sometimes it's about what's written. And second, that ignorance of the system is the real weakness most people have. Ethan never picked up a gun, he never lied to anyone, he never committed a violent act. He just understood the rules better than the people who made them. In a world where we're told that power is locked behind vaults, guarded by institutions, and enforced by government, sometimes all it takes is a smart kid and a loophole to turn the entire structure upside down. This isn't just a story of a bank and a teenager. It's a story about legal blind spots, about systemic vulnerabilities, and about how one person, even a kid, can legally break a system built to never be broken. If you think this was shocking, there are dozens of other legal tricks hiding in plain sight. Some that companies use every day, and some that ordinary people like you might be falling victim to without even knowing it. Subscribe to Silent Rights, where we uncover the most jaw-dropping legal loopholes, real cases, and secret tricks hidden within the law that the powerful don't want you to know. And remember, the most dangerous thing in any system isn't a hacker or a criminal. It's someone who reads the fine print.